Stay tuned for tonight's adventure with the Fat Man.
Okay, here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time of day it is, I hope it's good to be where you are, because I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Baltimore Fats, and this is more Mudletting with Static. Yeah! All right. So once again, Static has issued a challenge to alt history creators over how fake history is. And once again, he was gracious enough to talk to me in this very impromptu chat we just had, which will hopefully lead to more. All right, so if you're coming over here from Static's clip, I say, welcome to Mud City. We have a good time over here, so sit back, relax, and have fun, guys, all right? So to set this up, we were talking a little bit about YouTube censorship when the tape started rolling. All right, so here we go. I honestly have had no problems like censorship-wise or anything. I've never gotten, I got this copyright notice, but they didn't take down my video or anything, you know. I don't think I have a large enough presence for them to care. But, you know, all the types of videos that I've made, especially going into like the pandemic stuff, you know, and being very critical of that, you know, I have that, you know, misinformation tag on some of my videos, but I never had a video deleted or taken down.
Wow. After my channel got shut down, now if I talk about anything even remotely controversial, it's like automatically put on limits.
What video did you get shut down for?
Probably all of them, but there was that Orville Dam Watch Group, and that was actually a producer hired by YouTube and trolling everybody.
Wow.
And I don't know if you saw the video I put out, but he came on later bragging about it, saying, yeah, I'm a producer, YouTube hired me, and it was just
How long ago was that?
It was like 4 months after I started.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't remember that.
That was when I went from, 500 new subs a day to poof, just shut off.
Right.
So.
Wow.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, ever since then, now if I talk about any current affairs, they automatically limit my video.
Wow. You see, I talk about current affairs. I'm like the strain of my show, like this season has been all about examining identity politics and where that comes from out of our historical narrative, right? And so, yeah, they haven't shut me down at all. I say some controversial might be the wrong word, but, you know, not politically correct things, you know, because I'm not very fond of political correctness. You know, first off, let's say, I mean, I'm in total agreement about like the Tartarian creators and stuff like that. There's something not right out of that field, right? You know, and I don't think it's 100% of them. I think some people started their own channels. Like I started my own channel because I got interested in it, right? You know, so I think there are those.
Well, that's why I did.
Yeah, right. And I think there are those out there who started their channels with all that great intention and kind of bought into it. But the Tartaria thing came out of left field and was huge, you know. So it reeks of something, you know. It doesn't smell right.
Yeah, no, it was. The reason I got on Mud Flood is because I'm sitting here, it dawns on me that all these gaps in my history knowledge, it made perfect sense that, oh crap, there were catastrophes. And
right.
That's what keeps happening here is civilizations come and get wiped out. But then it was mainly 2 or 3 guys that all of a sudden they heard about Tartaria. They found out that countries have a different name than they used to, which is every country in the world.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, why aren't we calling them all the Axumites? I mean,
right.
Anybody heard of that? The Axum Kingdom?
In one video I made, I look at an old map from 1500s or something like that. It's like they could have just as easily run with this country name. It didn't have to, like Tartaria seems like a randomly chosen name, you know, just because it was on a map. You know, they could have chosen any lost name, you know.
Yeah, well, Sylvia at New Earth and then Philip through his men both talked about Tartaria and how it's called Grand Tartaria on the old maps. And grand just means big.
Right.
You know?
And big is a relative thing, right? What's big to one
and
culture is
the
small
most
to another.
sparsely populated place on Earth, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a couple channels. I'm being nice and not naming names here,
Right, yeah.
but
Well,
I mean, when they started all the World's Fair stuff and this and that, I mean, I contacted them and was like, hey, you know, this isn't right. And then in my videos, I was trying to steer them away from that. You know, I still hadn't found out everything that I know now,
right.
but I still thought there was a lot to it. And it was all Tataria, and it's because it got hundreds of thousands of clicks. That's
right.
I think
there was a definite campaign, you know, because I started my channel before Tartaria. I remember a time of Mud Flood before there was Tartaria, right? They were making Mud Flood videos
exactly.
before
I
there was
was
Tartaria.
there too.
All right, and so when Tartaria came along, there were channels who were coming out of nowhere, brand new channels with like 1,800 subs, but their videos were getting 60, 70, 80,000 views, right? And they were getting like 2,000 views a day. I was monitoring. I was looking at them. You know, they were getting 2,000 views a day with, you know, less than 2,000 subscribers total, you know? So, you know, I was like, this isn't right. You know, they're pushing. This is something that's being heavily pushed, you know? And, yeah, so I saw it for what it was right away. This is a story. Someone's selling a story here. Who is and why, I don't know. But, you know, they definitely created a market for it because that's what history, or not history, but that's what conspiracy type things have become. It's just a market. You know, I mean, you can sell anything to anybody here, you know.
and one of those main creators that sold the whole Tataria idea even said that he was a filmmaker. He was an aspiring producer. He wanted to be in the film industry, and the hardest thing to do is get subject matter. And so, boom, you get 100,000 views. This is nothing wrong with this story.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's the same with Flat Earth as well. And that's, you know, kind of what led me to making videos is when I started to get into watching Flat Earth videos, right? And they would only go so far.
Yeah,
it was always the same. Like, okay, there's no new direction. There's nothing happening with this, right? It's all the same things, just getting recycled and recycled and recycled. All right, and that's, you know, that led to the Mud Flood, which is now the same thing. It's just being recycled. And so when I was like, there's more to this story, right? And if I'm not finding these videos and these creators aren't making those videos, I need to know more, right? So I kind of I ran with the idea. I was like, okay, all right. What these creators are presenting is they're presenting a paradigm where all history is false, right? And I was like, so my premise is, okay, if that's true, how does it work, and who made it happen, right?
Right. Okay, so let's take the cathedrals for example. They're these energy generators, atmospheric energy powerhouses. So, I mean, look at a modern energy station, and it's just very, you know, brutalist.
Oh, yeah.
What you need to keep the water off the equipment.
Right, yeah.
So,
and it's ceramic, which is, you know.
People ripped out all of the power generation stuff, came in and carved all of these really intricate carvings, you know, portraying scenes from the Bible. And at the same time, those people were too primitive to be able to build that, right? Us settlers of the New Age. And I lose my train of thought, especially with the phone. But yeah, so they did that. They switched everything out, these awesome statues and carvings, and then nobody remembers those people. Nobody remembers any of this happening. I mean, how did you cover it up? How'd you make everybody just?
Well, this is kind of some of what I look at, you know, because nothing can really be reliably dated outside of what I call living memory. And living memory to me is your grandmother's grandmother or your grandfather's grandfather.
Yeah.
That's living memory. I remember my great-grandparents. So, although I was very small and I don't have, right? So
my great-grandpa lived to be 100 years old.
Right, so that's where living memory and what is presented to us on our stage here, which is how I kind of look at it, right? It can only be reliably trusted, and I hate using the word trust, going back like 150, maybe 180 years. Anything before then, you kind of have to take on faith, right? There's a level of trust involved in where you're getting your information from.
Agreed. It's always important to know where the information's coming from. But there's newspapers that have been in print since 1690 in America.
Oh, yeah.
But there are newspapers that have been continually in print since 1690s in America. In other countries, probably even longer. There have been universities and all of this stuff that's been around for 300 to 400 years.
Well,
and so how do you, I mean, we all see how they manipulate what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't get the full truth of what's going on.
Oh, yeah, no.
But the big events of history, which is mainly wars and kingdoms, all happen for the last few hundred years, because you can't have just a drastic changing, from one senior year to the next, or even over a lifetime. I would think you can change it incrementally, but I don't know. I just.
Well, one of the things, like I said, for me, like the big conceit is, why do we trust the information that's given to us, right? Because all we really know or understand is what we're shown, right? And we all learn it from somewhere, right? Where does that information come from? And so I've been tracking, like, who's responsible for building the first universities and schools in England and in Europe, right? And it all comes out of the church, and it all comes out of the English crown, right? And
yeah, exactly.
So, and this is where, because like, okay, if you know the church and the crown to be liars, how do you trust anything that comes from them? At what point how do you differentiate, what is good information and bad information when it's coming from a liar? When you know it's coming from liars.
Okay, and I agree 100% on that. Look, it's pretty well fact, as well as anything can be fact, that the Christian, mainly the Catholic Church, helped colonize all the colonized countries. And America was one place that Protestants fled from the Catholics. But
that's the narrative. That's what we're told. We don't know that that's what really happened. That's part of the staging aspect.
But the Protestants that fled there and came to America, I mean, they wrote books about it. And,
oh, yeah.
There is a lot of historical.
Well, that's what this is what's kind of exciting for me. Like, I'm on hiatus right now, but where I was going with my show is I'm looking at the people who wrote the history books. Who were they? Where did they come from? And could they have had an agenda? Like Washington Irving. Washington Irving, who wrote Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, right? That guy had access to forbidden libraries in Spain. He's the guy that wrote the biography of Christopher Columbus that was used as history. All right? He wrote biographies on Muhammad, George Washington. I mean, we don't, how much of what we know about that era comes from so few sources that just get repeated and repeated,
Yes, agreed. And that, that's what I was pointing out in my very first videos, is that everything we've got from 1600 on back in time is from like either one or two source, materials, original source materials. And so how do we know that that's not been changed?
Right.
That's like, I agree on all this. It's the 200 years ago narrative. I don't think that they could have pulled this off in that time, because the way I see it, there was the big reset in the 1300s.
Yeah.
And now they just tell everybody that it was just the Black Death.
Well,
and I've got all this evidence that's saying that it was worldwide catastrophes. But since that time, it went from, Florence, Italy. The Catholic Church has grown out, and they've infiltrated every kingdom and every education system. So it's their narrative from their
absolutely.
They're the ones that created the ancient world narrative.
Yeah. God, I have circumstantialist evidence that the Catholic Church could have created Islam. Yeah. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I don't remember what conclusion I came to on it.
Well, yeah, I don't have a conclusion on it. It was just interesting to find, because like I said, I'm looking at the story as they present it to us, right? They present it to us as history. This is what happened, right? And I'm like coming at it from like a crime scene angle. Yeah.
Well, so am I.
Yeah.
I don't take anything I'm looking at just at face value. I'm wondering where it's coming from, what were the motives for this, but when it satisfies my criteria, then I say, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense. It's got to make sense too, because a lot of times I will take what's written down and say, no, I think this is wrong because of this. And for example, the founding of America, I think that they came over here and the American population was already wiped out for the most part.
Yeah,
they say they came over and it was millions and millions of people, and then they got disease. And
I agree about that.
There was disease, I believe.
I believe.
I think there was the disease, but I think American populations had already been decimated by the last cycle.
Right. Well, I love the idea that the colonization efforts was a reclamation project.
Yeah.
And that those earliest settlers, like the India Company and the London Company, they were contractors. It was their job to go, survey, see what was left, and and rebuild, so to speak, right? I love that idea. But one of the things that, like with my show coming out of Baltimore, I make everything sort of very Baltimore centric. And
right.
I honestly believe that I can show that that they staged the American Revolution out of Baltimore. They staged the whole thing. They rigged it, right? Promoted it, and made it all look legit right out of Baltimore here. And now Baltimore is the shit show that it is to cover that up. All right, because we had some very influential families here in Baltimore that that mainstream history does not talk about. The richest person in America during the Revolutionary War lived in Baltimore. All right, he was the richest guy. You don't think he had anything to say about the American Revolution? He absolutely had interests, right? Especially going back to the crown, all right? And so many of these families have direct ties to the crown. Like Cornwallis, General Cornwallis, who Washington allegedly surrendered to Washington at the Battle of Yorktown. His great-grandfather was one of the first settlers in Maryland. So there are crazy connections that, really point to that happening here.
The first Europeans that came over, they teach that it was the Mayflower and the Puritans.
But the Spanish were here, especially,
sure, they came over, but also it was the aristocracy of England that came over and became the governors and so it was, families like you mentioned that go way back in history, but you can't name any of those Southern families now.
Right.
And you can't even find them. And honestly, I've got writings of a Northerner saying how you feel like a small person around these people. They're just so educated, and these are blue blood people.
Well,
and,
I'm not going to dig them out now, but
it's erased. All of that is erased, and it's just slavery.
Right. I have boxes of books behind me that I rescued from the bookstore record store that I work at, and in these boxes I have complete family genealogies of every family that is that fought in the American Revolution. Right? Every family from Virginia, every family from West Virginia and Maryland. I have their complete genealogies, which is really amazing. You know.
So when you say it was rigged out of Baltimore, you just mean that they were the protagonists?
No, well, again, I don't really have. So here in Maryland, so in Baltimore, the Carrolls were the family, right? It was Charles Carroll, who was the richest person in America at the time of the Revolution, right? And there were many Charles Carrolls, and this is the thing about going back in history. Everybody having the same name, is very confusing, right? So the Carroll family was the richest family in America at the time, and also the same Carroll family was the founders of the first Catholic basilica, right? Rome in America is here in Baltimore, right? So very influential families, and so it's the perfect meeting point for those coming down from the north and those coming up from the south. Those coming up from Georgia, Carolina, and Virginia meet in Baltimore. Those coming down from Boston, New York, Connecticut, they would meet in Baltimore, and they hashed it out. They carved up the country. They made it seem like it was going to be an independent, free thing, but it really isn't at all. I found very interesting documents. One is a reproduction of the Constitution that was found in England, right? And there's a very interesting story about it that makes it seem like it was the source document that they copied at the convention in 1776 or whatever. I mean, there's really interesting things in here, that really point to America still being under British control, right? That we're still just a part of the British Empire. However, that, shakes out. Again, I'm no expert.
So, like you said, there's the rich families behind the scene, and it's
none of the ones that you ever hear about. I mean, those are the families that I'm interested in. Who don't you know about?
Exactly. So just like today, they had to sell the independence idea to everyone in America.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The loyalist factions were, there was a large loyalist or royalist contingent in America,
Oh, exactly. You got your neighbors that are dead set against you rebelling, So it was a lot of cloak and dagger behind the scenes stuff, but, they did manage to convince enough people to actually rebel.
Yeah.
Well,
think about how with less sort of, for lack of a better term, like stimuli. Think how easy it is to sway people now, right?
Exactly.
And they have a lot of tricks to do it. They didn't even really need those kinds of tricks back then, if the story is as legit as they say,
People were way more skeptical and free-thinking back then. They didn't have all this, we think this now going on. Even when I was my grandparents' generation, you couldn't tell them crap.
Right. Because one of the things that they overwhelm us by presenting too much to think about.
To put this with the Revolutionary War, the average farmer, landowner, really did gain just about absolute freedom off of the Revolution and the Constitution and all this. Now, it was instigated by all of these very rich aristocratic families and everything. But from the 1812 era, or, they call it, from 1812 on until the Civil War, they call it Jeffersonian America, and it was anti-federalist. That was a political party, the anti-federalists. But so you do have the rich families behind the scene. They have to sell it to the general public. But back then, they were selling a much better package than they are today. Now they're just like, screw you, eats the bugs,
Right, yeah.
But
because they have everyone all doped up on tech. It's crazy.
It inspired Sweden or Switzerland, one of them, to form a constitution and emulate us. So it was a big deal at that time because we were the only ones to ever rebel against that colonization. I mean, they own, between the English and the Dutch, and they own the whole world,
Yeah.
and all of the trade. They were the
And it's all
biggest,
the same family, like the Dutch crown, the German crown, the English crown, French crown. They're all this. It's all the same family. They're all cousins. Or, it's like it's unbelievable.
According to their histories, going back to Charlemagne.
Yeah.
But that's another thing that has just been. I don't know that Charlemagne ever even existed.
Oh no.
I did a video on how Otto III just automatically added in 300 years of lineage, and I guarantee you that's been done. Well, the Catholic Church, and that huge list of popes of John I, John II, Peter I, Peter VII. They just, I'd say that basically they say they had that going back 2,000 years. So over half of that, I believe, is just made up and inserted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's part of what I was looking at on this last season that I was doing, is how much of the Anglo-Saxon and Viking story is bullshit. That's what really got this season rolling. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit in those stories.
Don't forget things like Viking ships have been found, though, so...
Well, and this is one of the things I look at. Could those Viking ships have been planted? I mean, that's kind of part of the tact that I'm taking,
Building one of those ships would be... It takes a lot of skill and a lot of work.
Oh, no. Like I said, I'm not saying it's easy, but is it possible? Because how much is possible when we don't understand the true nature of the past? Right, because again, we only know what we know about the past because we were told it. So we don't really.
Okay, but also, I'm a big archaeology buff.
Yeah.
And like 90% of all the archaeological sites. Hey, hang on just a second.
A lot of those, I really believe, are plants. They're staged to be found.
Well, here's the deal. Hold on, I'm having all kinds of... here's the deal. It's like 90% of all the archaeological sites are found by just regular people, farmers in their fields, construction guys like me, because we're the ones that dig down,
Right.
But so everything that I have seen, from the way they store their food in amphorae, from the wooden ships at the bottom of the ocean, to, everything that's out there tells me what the ancient culture was like. I mean, all the theaters, they must have loved, it was a very...
If those were even amphitheaters at all. That's what I'm saying. I mean, they just tell us they were amphitheaters. It could have been something entirely different. It could have been, that's...
Okay, but what?
Right, I don't know. I have no idea. Like I said, these are liars that we're dealing with. Who knows how deep the lies go? That's
right. But in the case of an amphitheater, when you look at it, what other purpose could it serve?
Oh, like I said, I don't know. I mean, I just question. That's one of the things.
That's fine, question everything, but when you can't come up with an alternative of what's there, then sure,
it could be a practical.
You don't have to buy it 100%, but the best working theory so far on me is it's an amphitheater.
Right, sure. To me, like I said, I'm so open because the show that I have, Mud City, right? It's a false paradigm that I'm deliberately creating using the presented narrative, right? And this paradigm I'm creating is one where flat Earth and mud flood and just about every conspiracy under the sun actually works in a very practical manner, right? Because all of these conspiracies are presented to us as information for those who are inclined to it, right? They need to, the intelligences that run this show know that they got to keep every little subsect busy, and they're busy creating new subsects to keep busy, all right? And that's what, like you were talking about, you couldn't tell your grandparents shit, right? Because they had lesser things to think about. They were, they didn't have all the confusion around them, that people have today. So their thoughts were more directed and, focused. Yeah, and so, I see. I lost my train of thought there. We doing his job now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I shouldn't have smoked now in all spaces. You had said something in there that I was going to go with, but I don't remember.
Right. Yeah, I lost it too. I was going somewhere.
Right.
But yeah, you know, so I just, it's really amazing to me because this is the thing about like the truth community that is interesting to me because these other channels out there, regardless of whatever they think, they're presenting it as truth, you know, but they really can't prove anything, right? You know, and that's, you know, so how is it that they can objectify their truth? You know, they can't, you know, so that's where, like, I try to look at it. Oh, I'm too high now.
Well, you made me think of one thing for an example is how do you know anything's real?
Right.
Take the Civil War, for instance.
Yeah. Oh, I totally think it could have been staged.
Everybody's great-grandparents were a part of the Civil War. Either they went off to it or the wives stayed home and worried. You go out, you can look up metal detector guys that go out to these battlefields all the time, walk around and pick up all these bullets.
Right. I do it.
So, you know, if the local people remember this event and you can still find the evidence of it, then it probably did happen.
Well, here's like, so in my show, because like, again, I'm trying to make everything work. So how would staging the Civil War work? And so in my show, I got these, you know, I got these Mutt and Jeff Lee type guys who wander around. It's like, why are we throwing these ball bearings over this field, boss? You know, because we need people in the future to think a battle was here. You know, shut up and get back to work. And I think that's
exactly.
They could have, if they were, you know, depending on the foresight of our controllers, and that's the thing that is, you know,
on top of that,
smart
they had to chop a bunch of legs off people and get them to pose for photos, because there's a ton of photos because cannonballs roll across the field and take legs out.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a lot again.
So they did a lot of fakery. They were dedicated. They cut their legs off.
Or they look like, and this is one of the things I got into was the like Marie Tussaud, right? The wax museum, right? Madame Tussauds wax museum. Right, it's a very
quick time out. Marie Tussaud.
Yep.
Okay, Marie Tussaud.
So Marie Tussaud, like wax museum, right? There's one in L.A. There's one in London. It's a very famous, like she has wax figures, right? Right, and so she started out in the late 1700s, right? And as a young girl, she was so good at making, you know, wax figures, right? That Voltaire volunteered to have a wax bust. She made one of Benjamin Franklin, right? When she was like 16 or 17 years old, right? She was a member of the Royal French Court, right? And she made wax. She was the art teacher for the king's nephew or something like this, right? And so, like, she was so good at making these dummies. Who's to say that she didn't make a bunch of dummies of the royal family that were executed? Because her story is that after the French Revolution, she goes on the run with her wax figures of all these famous people, right? And she, you know, and that's how she escorted them out of. She made them up. She changed, you know, she put makeup on them, stage makeup or whatever. Got the royals out of there, while dummies were the things that were beheaded, right? And I think about that in terms of these old photographs. I mean, some of them really look very staged, you know? I mean, just of the people I'm talking about, you know? And I think that...
Well, on that real quick, exposure times of the first cameras were like 10 to 15 minutes. I was actually just doing a video on this.
Mm-hmm.
So people did have to pose.
Yeah, they had to remain very still, right?
Yeah. I mean, a photograph was a big deal back then.
And that's why I think the dummy angle makes a lot of sense.
You know, it's like, oh, you can actually put what I'm seeing on a physical thing, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, they'd sit there, and that's why there's some movie that jokes about it, but that's why you don't see people smiling in those old photographs, because
Well,
sit there and hold a smile for 15 minutes.
Right, you can't do it. Oh,
The same person.
I got stories about that. You know, I'm not so big. It's about smiling it for the camera. You know, and it's like, you take the fucking picture already. You know.
Right.
But that's why I kind of like the dummy angle so much. I mean, because you don't have to worry about a dummy getting fidgety. You know, and so I think there's the potential for there to be a lot of staging, because it is there. The potential is there. Yeah, and that's the angle that interests me most, you know. What's possible, and then if it's possible, then how probable is it? And the level of probabilities for me change the closer and the deeper I look at the people they tell us put all this shit into place. Yeah.
Right.
Did you know, like, the top 5 publishers of the English language, right? 3 of them are owned by German companies. All right, so the 5...
Like you said, all the royal families and you know, households all across Europe and England, they were all interchanged for a long time. So, sorry.
Oh, no.
Family's German.
What did I say? What was it?
The 3 books.
Oh yeah. So the 5 largest publishers in the English language, right? The big 5. Mm-hmm. 3 of them are now owned by German companies. All right, so that's 40% of the English publishing world is owned by Germans. Yeah. You know, I mean, that's suspect to me. I was like, how is that okay?
Well, that goes for everything all around the world.
Right.
Because it's those families that did all the colonizing and got in early on the ground floor.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about cities and the families behind them. And a lot of people just talk about cities, but when you look at the small towns all across America, you know, a lot of them are named after their founders.
Oh, yeah. I think every state has a Carroll in it.
It was these not city rich people, but wealthy people that could come out and actually start towns. Otherwise, you know, like here where I live, it was a lot of individuals that just spread out in farmland, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But it's some type of tycoon.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap this up in a minute here.
There's a rich family behind every small town in America, you know, and it's a lot easier to look into those, because like around here, I can go to the old courthouses and see the date carved in there, and to see the old mills, and you know, all this stuff is still here. It's a little easier to see in small towns, and I've done this.
Well, that's what's really great about Baltimore, is there are still plenty of old buildings here, because again, they just shit on the city and left, right? And so there's still plenty of old buildings here in Baltimore, which is really amazing. You know, so I'm very grateful for that. I mean, that certainly, you know, is a bonus. You know, I was looking at one of the oldest schools in America, which is a building modeled after the Temple of Hephaestus, I think it was. Right, it's very interesting. Sorry, it was built in like 1822. It's one of the first public education schools in America, for young children, for like grade school, like, you know, 5, 6, 7, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was founded by Quakers, whom I love. But all right, Jared, I do have to run now. Right, I only had a little bit of time here this afternoon. But if you'd like to continue or do this again, certainly, I'm open for it, and this will give us an opportunity to take a look at what we've got here and see, you know.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I am. I got no agenda, so
yeah.
If you want to do it later, just hit me up when you're free.
All right, sounds good, man. Outstanding. All right, thanks so much. We'll talk later.
Yeah, man, that's great.
All right, bye.